Hello, everybody. This is week 5, and I pray that you guys are having an amazing time in this study. I hope you're making new friends. I hope you've started your journal, and I pray that God is already speaking to you, and I want to hear all about it. I'm loving the pictures that I am getting of all the groups, and I'm just excited. And anyway, I hope it is blessing you, and you started an awesome journey. And I will tell you, there's going to be some cool announcements as the time goes on. Some really cool announcements about some events that might be coming up for this group, Calling Over Comfort. But again, I hope you're enjoying your time coming through this study. I hope you're learning much, that God is calling you out, you're gaining courage, and you're making new friends and fellowshipping with one another. This week 5 is do what you can do and don't complicate it. Just do it and don't complicate it. You know, the best way to understand your calling, so many times I think we stop and don't do what God's called us to do because we're either complicating it or we just don't get started. You guys, there are just about, let me see, how many did I write down? There are going to be 7 uncomplicated rules. To uncomplicate things, I'm gonna give you 7 points, okay? Very quickly. We're gonna take it out of Samuel 17. This is a story of David and Goliath. This is one of the richest stories I believe of the Bible. It's so powerful. Now I want to go ahead and kind of set up what's going on. The Israelite army is up on one hill. Down in the valley, there's a valley, and then on the other hill is the Philistines. Now, one of their champions, he is a giant of a man. He is a warrior. He's been bred to be a warrior. He has come down in the valley, and he's begun to taunt the Israelite army. And he's set the rules in place. He says, you send me one of your warriors, one of your champions, will fight, and whoever wins actually will win the war, and that way no one else has to fight. That he thinks that's a good idea. And of course the Israelite army, even though that they are in battle array, they keep joining this battle every morning in full battle array, and even shouting as if they're going to fight, and every day no one will go. They're just so frightened. And it says in verse 4, and a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of his coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. He actually had someone holding his shield out before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve together. When Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Uncomplicate rule number 1. If you want to uncomplicate this, just do it and don't make this complicated. Rule number 1 is forget what everybody else is doing. If you are truly going to answer the call of God on your life, if you're truly going to move out and see massive and amazing things done through you, then you're going to have to quit worrying about what everybody else is doing. Okay, rule number 1, don't wait for someone else to do it. If God is calling you and burdening your heart about something, then God intends you to do it. Don't wait on someone else that you think is more qualified. Don't wait on someone else to qualify you or to tell you that it's okay to do it. Just do it. Don't complicate this thing by trying to wait on someone else to do it. Forget what everybody else is doing. Do what God is calling you to do. Now in verse 12, David was the son of a man from Bethany of Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And the man was old and advanced in years in the days of Saul. These 3 oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to battle. The names of these 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, he was the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest, they followed Saul and went to war. They became champions and warriors. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. So literally, this giant is taunting the Israelite army for 40 days. Morning and evening, he's coming out. Then Jesse said to his son David, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run it to your brothers at the camp. Carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of the thousands, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them." Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. Were they really fighting? No, they weren't fighting. They were standing there, dressed and ready with nowhere to go, right? So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. Uncomplicated rule number 2. Don't let your past or position keep you from doing what God calls you to do. Don't let your past or your position keep you from doing what God calls you to do. So here's the thing. His brothers were the soldiers, right? They had been trained for battle. They had the armor. They had the weapons. They were trained for war. David was trained to be a shepherd. But here was God about to call him to take out this champion of the Philistines, and David was just a shepherd. If David had not believed that God was calling him out, and if he had focused on his past or focused on his position or focused on whether or not he was qualified, he never would have stepped out. So if you want to uncomplicate the call on your life, you have got to forget about your past. You've got to forget about your position or what you feel like you're unqualified for. Your lack of experience should never stop you from doing what God's called you to do. You guys, listen to me. I know this firsthand. When God first called me out to start doing these daily devos and now this Bible study, I feel so unqualified to do this. My husband was the one with all the doctorates and the schooling and the college and all of those things. You guys, I've never gone to one class in college. I have learned the Bible literally by poring over it in the mornings and asking God what He wanted to say. I wake up every morning, Monday through Friday, knowing that there's a call on my life to do these daily devos with nothing when I wake up. But yet God is so faithful that as I'm getting ready in the morning, He begins to download the message into me. I go to my computer, and as fast as I can type and stay up with Him, I am typing up what He's telling me. And I literally deliver it hoping that it makes sense. I am the most unqualified person to be doing these daily devos every day. But God told me a long time ago, through the Word of God, it says that in my weakness, He's made strong. It is in my weakness and the fact that I have nothing to offer that you know that it's God, because it can't be me. It is Him. And I love that. Literally, what that verse tells me is that it is in our weakness, it is in our not being qualified that qualifies us. So you're going to have to realize that the thing that God calls you to do, you may not be qualified for. You may not be trained for. You may not even carry a position or a title that makes it okay for you to do it. But what qualifies you to do it is the God call on your life and your willingness. So you want an uncomplicated rule number 2 is don't let your past or your qualifications discount you. You're going to have to let them go and do what God told you to do. I'm so glad that I did, because I wouldn't have all of you guys as my new friends for sure. I'm glad I just obeyed God. Now, David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper. We're at verse 22 if you're following along. Ran to the army and came and greeted his brothers. Then, as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words that he's been doing every day. So David heard them. And all of the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who has come up?" They're talking to David. "Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, and give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from all taxes in Israel." Now, exemption from taxes, now that would be worth it all about, wouldn't it? I'm just kidding. Then the people answered him, and then David spoke to the man who stood by him, saying, "What shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel?" I mean, like, David's like, what? What did you just say? What's going to be done for the man who takes away this reproach? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? I love David. Do you hear him? I mean, he's getting an attitude. He's like, what's going to be done for the man who takes him out? He defies the armies of God. Who's going to, for who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying it again, "So shall it be done for the man who kills him." Uncomplicated rule number 3. The real truth will always uncomplicate the situation. You see, what David realized, you see, what the Israelite army was focused on was that the Philistine was actually, taunting them. But see what David got? David said, he's not just taunting the Israelite army. He's taunting God himself. And David knew the truth, the simple truth. And the truth was that if he was taunting God, then God was about to take that Philistine out. God wasn't going to put up with it. So you want to uncomplicate a situation? See what Satan ultimately wants to do? The Bible says that Satan is a liar. And so there's always deception in the middle of something. And when God's calling you, he'll begin to lie to you, right? Just like he tried to do Jesus when Jesus was in the wilderness or in the desert being tempted. Satan tries to lie. Adam and Eve, when he went to them, he would twist the truth. So the first thing that you need to do is begin to ask God, I need to know the truth of this situation. I don't want to hear the lies. I do not want to hear the lies. Now, David knew that Goliath defied God, not just the army, but God. And if that was so, God would deliver the victory. If you are on the right side, you have no worries. God has this. If God is for us, the Bible says, who can be against us? David saw the truth in this situation. The whole Israelite army, all they saw was a champion. They didn't see the truth that God would take him out. Verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness?" He is actually trying to demean him or criticize David, make him feel less than. He says, "You're just a shepherd." I mean, that's what he's trying to say. He's saying, "You're just a shepherd. Where did you leave those few sheep that Dad makes you in charge of? Why are you here? I know your pride and insolence," Eliab says to him, "of your heart, and you have come down to see the battle." He's saying, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. Now watch what David does. I love this. And David said, "What have I done now, Eliab? Is there not a cause?" He is defying God. There's a cause. We got to do something. Then he turned from him. I have it underlined in my Bible and highlighted. Then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. You have got to, uncomplicated rule number 4 is turn away from the negative people in your life. You have got to start turning away, because when God begins to call you out, a couple of things happen. People are uncomfortable with that call in your life. They are challenged by that call in your life. And it offends them that you are walking out your call. And it's either going to offend them and change them, or it's going to offend them and they're going to harden their heart. But here's the thing. You want to uncomplicate things. You want to move out with God. You want to see God move in your life. You want a calling that's way over your comfort. You're going to have to turn away from the negative people in your life. Negative people always complicate God's call in your life. Now, I want you to also notice something else. He doesn't argue with them. He's not up there trying to rally the troops. I want you to notice as I finish this story, he doesn't try to rally the troops. He doesn't try to get them to do something. He just says, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. I will take out the Philistine army. You guys, we get into vain arguments with people and we need to stop. We need to stop. We don't need to convince anybody else. We just need to do what God calls us to do. That's it. And we can't wait on someone to validate us. Just do what God's called you to do. Turn away from the negative people and move out. Now you're going to see at the end of the story, the power of this story. Remind me to remind you, right? You need to see the end of the story, because although he's having to turn away from them, at the end of the story, when he conquers Goliath, guess what happens? The whole Israel army gains courage because of what David did, and they move out and join David in the battle, and it is so powerful. Verse 31, now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, now Saul is the king, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistines. So David, young David, shepherd boy David, is looking at King Saul, who is also afraid. He's not gone out there. The Israel army has not gone out there. He says, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. Now Saul looks at David, and all he sees is a shepherd. He says, you're not able to go against the Philistine to fight him, for you are a youth. You're too young. And he, a man of war from his youth. He's been trained. But David said to Saul, and I want you to watch what David did. It is so powerful. Your servant, this is what David is saying to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion and a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it, and I struck it and delivered the lamb from its very mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both a lion and a bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me. Now listen to who he's giving credit. Who is he giving credit about the lion and the bear? And the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Uncomplicated rule number 5. Recount. When God's calling you out, begin to recount how faithful God has already been in your life. State it, speak it up. This will help you focus and keep your mind uncluttered and away from fear. This will conquer your fear. Begin to speak out loud what God has already done and how faithful he has already been. Recount what God has done in your life, and you will see the fear go away because you are speaking life into it. Verse 38. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took Saul's armor off. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. Uncomplicated rule number 6. Don't try to be someone else. God prepared you for what he called you to do. Hear me again. Don't try to be someone else. God prepared you for what he's called you to do. Notice here, Saul begins to say, okay, I'll let you go. I hear that you think you can do this. and you feel like God's going to stand by you, but you need to put my armor on. Well, Saul was so much bigger than David, and this armor, I mean, David wasn't even used to walking in it. He says, I can't even walk in this. And David was wise enough to know, I'm not going to be someone else. You know, it's funny because Wade used to laugh all the time that when he first began preaching, he would try to sound like Billy Graham. He literally would try to sound like Billy Graham. And he realized that's not, Billy Graham is Billy Graham. And he was a powerhouse for God Almighty. You guys, listen to me. But Wade had to be Wade. And even when I started speaking myself, I would try to be Wade sometimes. And God told me, I didn't put a calling on your life to be Wade. I put a calling on your life, Francine, to do what Francine was called to do. It's the same thing for you. Don't try, when God calls you to do something, don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. Be who God called you to be. You guys, sometimes I think I am just so normal on here. Like I'm not eloquent with words, and I don't use deep Greek and Hebrew and all these things, and sometimes I can get intimidated by that. And then God tells me, I called you, the mother of 3 children, the wife of an amazing husband who had 27 years of amazing marriage, and I'm simple. That's just the way it is, and I deliver the word the way I receive it. It's just that simple. And God said, that's who I've called to do it. Just be yourself. Well, God's calling you to do something too. And maybe you're stopping because you're thinking, well, I want to be like this, or I've got to do like this, and I don't know how to do this. And it's made you not move out on what God's called you to do. Don't do that. God would not have called you to do something that he didn't already equip you to do. Look what David did. He set down all the warriors' protection, armor, and weapon, and picked up what? A sling and a stone. Why? Because that was a shepherd's weapon. God was calling David the shepherd to take out a giant that an army could not. He did it on purpose. You guys, God has already given you, equipped you, and given you what you need to accomplish what he's calling you to do. You. Don't be afraid. Do what God's called you to do. And please, uncomplicated rule number 6, don't try to be someone else. And don't wait on something else. You be you. God prepared you for what he called you to do. Then it says he drew near to the Philistine. David drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him. He began to mock him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? See, he begins to make fun of David. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. He's starting to talk smack, right? He is. Satan will do that for you too. He'll begin to talk like that. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. Now listen to David as he begins to bring glory to God and point this victory that he's about to have. He's already pointing it to God. But I have come to you. Did he say a sling? Did he say with Saul's armor? No, listen to what he said. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all of this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Uncomplicated rule number 7, begin to claim and proclaim the truth. This isn't your battle, right? This ministry, Consumed by the Call, it's not my ministry. It's God's. It's not even Wade's, you guys. It's God's. He's doing it. What he's called you to do, that's his. And he's going to do it, but he loves to use his children to do it. He loves to use his children to do it. I remember hearing a story out of one of Max Lucado's books. It's so powerful. He said he was in one of those like thrift stores, and his daughter was walking around, and they were looking around, and next thing he knows, he hears this piano. I mean, it is playing the most beautiful song, and he's like, who is playing the piano? And he walks around the corner and he looks, and his little girl, who's like 5 years old, is sitting at the piano, and she's playing it. And he looks at her and he goes, he's kind of from a distance, and he looks over at her and he thinks, oh my goodness, I have a prodigy. I didn't even know. She's never taken a lesson, and she's sitting there playing the most beautiful music. He watches as a crowd begins to gather around his little girl, and she is just playing. Those fingers are moving all over the keyboard. He is sitting there and she is laughing and having the best time. Well, he begins to move closer and closer, thinking he has a prodigy of a daughter, and realize that it's an old player piano. The piano is playing itself, but Jenna, his daughter, is having a blast, and she's getting the accolades of the whole crowd, yet she's not playing it at all. The piano is playing itself. That's exactly what God is doing in and through us. Jenna had a blast playing and moving around while that piano, and it was drawing a crowd. It's the same thing. We're like little girls and little boys with God calls on our lives, and God wants to use us, and the whole time he's doing it anyway. He's doing it anyway, and he loves it, just like Max was enjoying watching his daughter enjoy playing that piano that was playing itself. It's the same thing. Proclaim the truth. It's not your battle. It's not personal, and the enemy, well, he's going down because Jesus is about to take him out. I love it. So it was when the Philistine arose, this is verse 48. So it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it just like a shepherd would sling it, and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. Boom. God took him out with one stone. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. And there was no sword in his hand, because David didn't carry a sword. So David ran over and stood over the Philistine, took the Philistine sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they began to run. Now the men of Israel and Judah, the ones that were scared, the ones that were looking at David like, what are you doing? You don't have any kind of armor. What are you doing going out there with a stone and a sling? Now all of a sudden they arose and shouted and pursued the Philistine as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistine fell among the road, even as far as Gath and Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. The results of one person moving out and following God is it will activate the entire church. You want to see revival? Then just move out and do what God called you to do. Take a hold of this. Ask God this week, God, what gifts and talents have you already created in me, that you've already prepared in me? And what are you calling me to do? I am going to go by these rules. I'm going to proclaim the truth. I'm not going to speak negative. I know that this is your battle and you're going to take out the enemy. I know I'm not going to let my past or my position or my lack of qualification stop me. The real truth will always uncomplicate it. So I'm going to see the truth. This is your battle, God, and who can be against me? I'm going to forget what everyone else is doing, even if I'm the only one moving out for God, right? I'm going to recount what God has already done in my life. This will help me focus and keep my mind uncluttered. And I'm not going to try to be someone else. I'm going to be who God created me to be and use the gifts and calling that he put inside of me. That's what you're going to do. And God's going to do amazing things through you. Now you're going to get to have some discussion time. Gather together. Be honest with each other. Share your gifts. Don't be afraid. It's not bragging. God's given you gifts. I'm going to tell you one more story just to kind of hone this in so you can have a good discussion here. We had a friend of ours that told us, I wish I could sing, I wish I could preach, but I don't know what I could do for God. Wade asked him, what is it that you love to do? He said, well, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you. And he says, what do you mean you're embarrassed to tell me? He says, well, it's nothing great. He said, but tell me, what do you love to do? The man said, I love to fish. And he says, tell you the truth, I'm really good at it. He said, I can go out on a lake when no one else is catching fish, and I can catch fish. And Wade said, well, then start a fishing ministry. He said, what do you mean a fishing ministry? And he said, well, gather some young men together that don't have dads. Gather them together, put them on a boat, show them how to fish, spend an afternoon with them, and then share the gospel with them while they're out on the boat fishing. And he said, well, I'd like to do that. And Wade said, did you think that what God called you to do, you wouldn't like to do? And he says, well, I guess not. So this guy went out and did just that. We came back for another revival and we asked, did you do it? He said, yes. And he says, you're not going to believe it. He said, I love my ministry. I've started a fishing ministry and I've taken young men out, taught them how to fish, and I've led so many to Christ. And guess what? Now my wife loves it when I go fishing. She loves it when I go fishing because she sees God using it. And let me tell you something. He won more people to Christ on a fishing boat than Wade had in his evangelistic ministry. How powerful is that? So what is it that you love to do? Do you love to cook? Do you have a talent in sewing? Do you just love talking to people? Maybe you love to write letters and notes. Maybe God will wake you up every morning and someone needs a card from you. You never know. God's already prepared you and gifted you, and you're thinking it's not important to the kingdom. And God's saying it is so pivotal to the kingdom. Somebody needs your gift. So as you're discussing, I think it's question number 1 that you're going to talk about what your gifts are. Share them. Share them in your group. What has God already given you as a gift? And discuss maybe how that can be used. Then as the week goes by, I want you to ask God every night, God, show me what gift you've given me and show me how to use it for your kingdom. I want to give it to you. I want to be myself doing what you've called me to do. And I believe you can do it. I love you guys so much. That's week 5. Goodness gracious, we're getting through these so fast. I hope you have a great discussion time. Make friends, and I will see you next week. See you later.